Welcome to this explainer. Today we are looking at a completely fascinating collision. Imagine ancient Eastern wisdom absolutely crashing head-on into the reality of the modern Western mind. We're going to look at this core meditation practice, something that comes straight from the high-altitude hermitages of Tibet, and unpack exactly why it completely fell apart when they tried to teach it here in the West. But more importantly, we'll see how the late, great Harvard psychologist and meditation master, Dr. Daniel P. Brown, basically saved it. He brilliantly adapted this practice, evolving it into something that works for everyone. We're going to explore how he built this incredible bridge between deep psychological healing and ultimately profound spiritual awakening. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. In the traditional Tibetan model, there's this core practice where the meditator is asked to view literally every single sentient being as their own mother. To a traditional Tibetan, this makes perfect sense. It is the ultimate hook for compassion. And why is that? Because in their culture, the mother is basically the unquestioned epitome of selfless sacrificial love, absolute limitless kindness. But when Dr. Brown tried teaching this to Westerners, he hit a massive brick wall. Seriously, I want you to notice what happens internally right now if I ask you to view a parent as perfectly selfless. Does it spark a wave of unconditional love? For a lot of Western students, visualizing their biological mother did absolutely not do that. Instead, it spoon-fed them this core cultural mismatch, sparking waves of deep ambivalence, sometimes trauma, and a whole lot of negative self-talk.
To understand why this ancient visualization completely fails for so many of us, we really have to look at our own cultural reality. In North America and Europe, roughly 1 out of 3 individuals grows up with insecure attachment. That is huge. A lot of us experience what Dr. Brown called instrumental love. What does that mean? Well, it's a dynamic where parents are, technically doing their jobs. They're providing physical needs, cooking dinner, driving you to soccer practice. But emotionally, they are present, but not actually present. So when Westerners are told, hey, use your mother as a profound spiritual anchor, it just doesn't work. In fact, when psychoanalysts first heard about this Tibetan practice, they were literally horrified, because in our culture, the mother figure is so frequently a source of deep psychological conflict.
So the crucial point here, and this is where it gets really interesting, is how this cultural reality actually impacts the mind itself. If you grow up without a deeply felt sense of safety, your mind basically adopts a state of chronic distrust. We call this the searching mind. It's a mind that is constantly, tirelessly scanning the horizon for threats. It literally cannot rest. And think about it. If your mind cannot rest, meditation just becomes a battlefield. You simply can't relax deeply enough to recognize the true nature of awareness because you're essentially trying to think your way to peace. You totally lack the secure base that's actually required to just let go.
Moving on to Level 1, Clinical Repair, Rebuilding the Secure Base.
To fix this lack of a secure base, Dr. Brown had an absolute breakthrough realization. He realized that Westerners often need traditional psychotherapy as a sort of preliminary practice. Before a student can even hope to access the unbounded wholeness of awakened awareness, they first have to heal their attachment system. So, to achieve this repair, he developed something called the Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, or IPF. Now, to be clear, this wasn't meditation. This was highly sophisticated clinical psychotherapy designed for trauma patients. He had patients visualize highly customized, cherishing parents, specifically tailored to their individual nature. And these figures were designed to provide the 5 functions of secure attachment: fierce safety and protection, deep attunement to who you truly are, soothing and comfort for emotional regulation, express delight in your very existence, which is absolutely crucial, and active support for your self-development. By repeatedly visualizing these ideal figures, patients actually successfully remapped their internal working models of relationships. It finally gave them the psychological safety they never had growing up.
Now, let's take a look at Level 2, Spiritual Retinue, the Spiritual Assembly. Let's move to the next phase and see how this built, because this is where the genius generalization really starts. Bringing a clinical protocol like IPF into a deep meditation retreat felt, well, a little too clinical. So Dr. Brown shifted away from personal trauma histories entirely. Instead, practitioners would visualize a central mentor surrounded by this great spiritual assembly. It could be Buddha, Jesus, Ramana Maharshi, or really any great beings. Just look at this fantastic quote from a practitioner describing the retinue. It's kind of like your spiritual posse, like my ideal mother, who is full of attunement and love and safety. Notice what's happening? This spiritual assembly is providing the exact same 5 attachment functions as the clinical protocol. They provide total non-judgmental acceptance. But now it includes the added transmission of spiritual views, so you're still getting the attachment repair, but it's happening through a totally universal spiritual lens.
Which brings us to Level 3, Field of Care, universal from day one.
Now here's the really crucial thing to understand. This evolution isn't some rigid ladder you have to climb step by step. No, it's a completely universal framework that is accessible from day one. Psychologically, it completely bypasses the heavy baggage of parental attachment. By focusing on a single moment or a benefactor, you sidestep those childhood trauma triggers and tap directly into a universal capacity for warmth. Let's look at the practical how-to of this brilliant generalization. To evoke this field of care, you just use whatever works for you. Step 1. Remember a single caring moment. Maybe a time a loved one, a favorite teacher, or honestly, even a pet looked at you with total, unconditional appreciation. Step 2. Bring to mind a benefactor, someone who gave to you with zero expectations. Or, Step 3. Visualize a spiritual figure radiating love. Any genuine experience of unconditional love acts as a gateway here. You're just using that specific memory or image to totally suffuse your mind and body with the light of loving energy.
And as you sit in that warmth, something incredibly profound happens. We call it the ontological shift. This is the moment we move entirely out of the realm of clinical repair. At this point, you're no longer trying to fix a broken attachment system, right? You're not desperately trying to install missing parental software into your brain. Instead, you are transitioning into direct recognition. You start realizing that this profound feeling of safety and love, it isn't actually something you're having to manufacture from scratch. It's already there. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this instruction fundamentally redefines the entire practice. Read this quote carefully with me. Notice that this open, spacious warmth of loving energy isn't separate from your own awareness. It's an aspect of our true nature. That is absolutely huge. The field of care isn't just some preliminary step to calm your nervous system down before the real meditation begins. No, it is the very ground of awareness itself. Love and compassion aren't just these fleeting emotions you have to conjure up with effort. They are the fundamental built-in properties of a mind that is finally resting in its natural state.
And that brings us to this arc of generalization, which really shows Dr. Brown's true legacy. You see, he didn't just invent disjointed techniques or map out rigid phases for the sake of it. Instead, he took one singular, incredibly profound Tibetan insight, the idea that unconditional loving presence is the very ground of awareness, and he adapted it across multiple contexts. He took it from clinical trauma repair with the IPP protocol, over to spiritual retreat support with the retinue, all the way to this universal day one recognition with the field of care. He generalized the underlying principle at every single step so that the Western mind, regardless of its individual trauma history, could finally actually access it.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate takeaway. Think of it like the ocean and the waves. Your attachment trauma, your ambivalence, that restless searching mind, all the negative self-talk, those are merely temporary waves crashing on the surface. But underneath all of that turbulence is a deep, warm ocean of boundless awareness. That traditional Tibetan mother visualization, it was really just a cultural pointer aimed at that deep ocean. When that specific pointer completely failed in the West, Dr. Brown gave us new pointers: the ideal parents, the spiritual posse, the memory of a caring moment. He designed all of these to help us find the exact same warmth that naturally, intrinsically exists within every single one of us. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The traditional image of the mother was always just a pointer. What she actually pointed to is always available to you right now. So can you recognize that this open, spacious warmth isn't some distant goal you have to achieve? It isn't a childhood trauma you have to perfectly and permanently fix. Rather, it is your own true nature. I invite you to just let the temporary clouds of conceptual thought clear away for a moment and rest in the radiant sun of your own awareness. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.